enjoy the bareback riding now. We still have some more to go. And it will be chute number 1 for Philip Coker. Chute number 1.
It is said that to have a mind is both a curse and a blessing, and that the one is the left hand of the other. Humankind alone understands that life is harsh, that reality can try the soul and drive down the will. Some say it is part of the human miracle that we possess an intuition of a better way. Some say it does us no good. It is wiser to accept things as they are.
A man saw a ball of gold in the sky. He climbed for it, and eventually he achieved it. It was clay. Now this is the strange part. When the man went to earth and looked again, lo, there was the ball of gold. Now this is the strange part. It was a ball of gold. Aye, by the heavens, it was a ball of gold.
Scattered here and there on the imaginary maps of men's minds are certain islands and kingdoms conceived by visionary spirits, sequestered, beautifully ordered commonwealths. These islands bear the label Utopia, and, for many, the geography of the mind would be drab indeed without them. As Oscar Wilde remarked, a map of the world that does not include Utopia is not worth glancing at. It leaves out the one country at which humanity is always landing. The word utopia, a synonym for all perfect societies, was originally coined by Sir Thomas More as the name for his vision of the good place and for the book he wrote about it. With a subtle touch of irony, More created the word utopia from two Greek words meaning no place. The very name acknowledges the paradox More saw inherent in any concept of an ideal state. And paradox it is, this hankering and striving for perfection, knowing all the while that perfection is not possible. Utopian thinkers are frequently accused of fanaticism, perhaps because of their absolute certainty that they can mold the world into a model of perfection. If perfection is hard to come by, it may be said that the fanatic's energy and zeal make for strong positive commitments, direction, bold responses to incredible challenges. While More gave us the term, it was Plato who provided the archetype of utopian thought. The blueprint of an ideal Greek city-state Plato conceived in his book, The Republic. Just large enough to be self-sufficient, the state has a population divided into three classes: workers, military protectors, and guardians. The guardians are ruler philosophers, copies undoubtedly of Plato himself. In such a meritocracy, or should one say philocracy, there can be no question of mobility. Those with distinguished minds must make the critical decisions. Decisions not to be questioned by those whose job is not to think. Decisions such as which arts are to be permitted and which banned. Poetry, for example, is divine madness and potentially dangerous to the rational state. Such a public is immune to change. Its pattern of order, static like that of the insect societies with which some critics have compared it. Its constitution and discipline have but one aim: fitness for war. Plato understood clearly that only a state on a perpetual footing of war could make such authority and coercion tolerable to its citizens. But the paradox of the ideal society has always been there, so say the critics, and remains there still. To have perpetual order and an unchanging system of governance, there can be no such thing as freedom for all. These critics point to a certain chilling resemblance between Plato's Republic and some modern planned societies. Utopian thinkers, however, have been quick to point out that there can be no ideal society without limiting some freedoms for the greater good. But Plato cannot be blamed for miscarriages of justice. One utopian thinker who did see freedom as the essence of the ideal society was the 19th century American philosopher Henry David Thoreau. Thoreau had a stubborn, pragmatic streak that told him theory was not enough. The ideal way to test the truth of an idea or an ideal is to live it. On the shores of Walden Pond, Thoreau launched his own one-man utopian experiment. Though his castle was a tiny cabin he built himself, his domain was all the surrounding countryside and all creation besides.
I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived. I did not wish to live what was not life. Living is so dear.
For 2 years and 2 months, Thoreau pursued his ideal life, not as a hermit, as some suppose, but as one who sets an invisible moat between himself and his fellow townsmen to gain perspective. Here, he embarked on the sober task of testing his assumptions about life, practicing a set of principles he believed placed him in organic relationship with nature: chastity, vegetarianism, temperance, reverence for all living creatures, and above all, solitude. It was an essential feature of his experiment that he alone must be the total population of his commonwealth.
One man, more right than his neighbors, constitutes a majority of one. I learned this from my experiment, that if one advances confidently in the direction of his dreams and endeavors to live the life which he has imagined, he will meet with a success unexpected in common hours. New, universal, and more liberal laws will begin to establish themselves around and within him. In proportion as he simplifies his life, the universe will appear less complex. If you have built castles in the air, your work need not be lost. That is where they should be. Now, put foundations under them.
Why did Thoreau leave this woodland utopia? Was it, as has been suggested, that the ideal, once actually grasped, soon loses its romance for us? Was it, as Thoreau indicated, that he had several more lives to live and wanted to be gone before the world beat a path to his doorstep? Was it that the hermit's life, lived as close to nature as possible, doesn't work? In any case, according to psychoanalyst Rollo May, the capacity to rebel is of the essence in a constructive society. In some minds, the intelligent alternative to idealism is science. But in our age, some of the most purely utopian thought has come from science. The difference is, however, that with scientific idealism, the technology actually exists to implement a utopian plan, and this fact is not always comforting. B.F. Skinner, a behavioral psychologist, has looked at modern life and, with concern, decided that trapped by the specters of nuclear war, overpopulation, and environmental destruction, humanity can no longer afford to let society develop randomly. The secret, says Skinner, is not to go on creating environments that people like, but to create people who like their environment. And he turns to the technology of modern behavioral science to accomplish this goal. Skinner presents his plan for a modern utopia in his novel, Walden II. Unlike Thoreau's one-man experiment, Walden II is a complete community, a model for ideal civilization. Still, it is loosely based on some of Thoreau's ideas. Examine your life. Change it if necessary. Simplify your needs. To this, Skinner adds his own precepts. Human behavior is determined not from within, but from without. It is not fixed. It can be and ought to be changed. Human behavior can and ought to be controlled. Skinner says that he seldom observes people without wanting to exclaim, "Damn you, behave." In Walden II, there are no police or military to make people behave. Under the guidance of a board of planners, acceptable behavior is maintained with, as Skinner puts it, gentle but pervasive ethical sanctions. The properly keyed responses are carefully induced from infancy on. Unlike Plato's Republic, Walden II stresses the ability of the community to change and grow as conditions change. And, unlike Plato, Skinner encourages the pursuit of the arts and humanities. But the implication is clear that only those arts programmed as acceptable would be pursued. Walden II follows a Marxian plan of communal ownership and care based on labor credits. But labor itself is no longer a problem because of efficient planning, attractive incentives, and innovative human engineering. The inhabitants of Walden II would be free of jealousy, free of gossip, free even of the burden of freedom itself, when freedom is conventionally defined. We are not, nor ever shall be free in a romantic, heroic sense, Skinner maintains. Our every move is already programmed from a behavioral standpoint, but too often in conflicting patterns. In other words, conditioning happens whether we like it or not. Why not do it right? Walden II was written in 1948, when much of behaviorism was still largely theoretical. In his newer preface to the book, acknowledging advances in the behavioral technology, Skinner writes, "I would pay more attention to deviant behavior, accepting the possibility that some members of the community would be problems and would need to be dealt with in special ways." But Skinner's utopia is not warmly accepted in all quarters. Theologian Richard Rubinstein says, "Suppose some future controller told dissenting groups, 'Behave, damn you.' What would prevent the controller from employing his own final solution?" Rubinstein calls Walden II less a blueprint for the golden age than for the theory and practice of hell. But some say neither Skinner's nor any other utopia need alarm us. What utopia can actually exist? That's not its point. Regardless of how we view the models presented by Plato or Skinner, their job is to remind us that the world is far from ideal. The change is needed. Whenever a utopian starts his quest, final blueprint in hand, certain of having the answer, another idealist sets off on a different path. The search, the striving itself, is the source of wisdom and growth. Honoring the vision that animates the quest, says that idealist, is not to expect perfection in life or really want it. Perfection is not a true condition of life, but another name for arrested development. For all idealists, there is a joy in the very act of striving and in looking at the result, asking, couldn't it be better still?
If something works, you're usually gratified not so much because it worked, but because it gave you a thrill. You build on that step, on that excitement to get the next one. It's a little bit like a vice. You know, how do I know that the next time I do this, it won't be bigger and better and knock me over? That's what you're always struggling for. Well, you forget all about the frustrations. That was just par for the course. Because the process in itself is so rewarding. When I was in art school, I think I was about 18, maybe 16. The moment you embarked, even in school, you were conditioned to believe that you were dedicated. In capital letters, you were dedicated to become a great artist. Well, you throw that off as you go through life and keep working. But once you have learned in your callow youth that the ideal is what you're shooting at, I'm not sure you get over that. I'm not sure you can unlearn it. You may not talk about it anymore in words or in statements. But basically, in back of all of your efforts and your thinking, it is there. I really haven't examined this myself for years and years, but I'm trying to figure out myself why you just don't stop. But now say you have painted a bird, and you know that the next bird you paint should be better and more beautiful. Now, if that's what is meant by the ideal, possibly that is what's wrong with you. That's what ails you. If you're painting, enameling, sculpting, potting, it doesn't make any difference. It's that same thing, you know, because when you stop to eat, cook, maybe dust a room, you're taking a little time off from your real day. Now there's frustration. But if you're up to your elbows in clay, I don't know if you'd know a frustration if you met it. You're doing it for excitement. It sounds a little weird. Here I'm 72 years old, and I'm still working for excitement. Fun. It seems more really important now than it did when I was 18.
The Japanese are notable for their insistence that some of the simplest human acts can be performed delicately, gracefully, beautifully, that idealism can be an active, actual way of living. Everything in a Japanese garden exists to expand the senses. The garden is both a visual and a tactile experience. But more than this, the traditional Japanese lifestyle is marked by courtesy, respect, especially for older people, and a softness intended to soothe the spirit. What unites all these principles under the label idealism is that they transcend the thinking, the desires necessary for simple survival, and perhaps they are what sets humankind apart from all living creatures. Indeed, this transcendent need at times seems to take precedence over the instinct for self-survival.
Soldiers rode to battle like his saber freshly honed, pointed like a shaft of silver toward the glory of his own. Vicksburg and Manassas, at Shiloh and Chancellorsville, the single thing of honor was to take but one more hill. Will his wars rage forever? Will his children never learn? Will they write their names in fire? Will they see their future burn? Saw the mighty
In looking for an individual who exemplifies this quest for the ideal, we find ourselves turning not to history, but to fiction, to the unlikely hero of a 16th century Spanish novel. For no one ever more passionately pursued his dream in the face of ridicule and reality than Cervantes' Don Quixote de la Mancha.
You must know, friend Sancho, that I was born in this Iron Age to restore the Age of Gold, or the Golden Age, as some choose to call it. I am the man for whom fate has reserved the most glorious adventures. Look yonder now. There are at least 30 outrageous giants whom I intend to kill.
What giants, your worship?
Those you see yonder with their long, extended arms.
Please, Don Quixote, look better. Those things are not giants, but windmills.
Thou art but little acquainted with adventures. I tell thee, they are giants. And therefore, if thou art afraid, go aside and say thy prayers. For I am resolved to engage in a dreadful, unequal combat against them all.
Stop, your worship! Stop! No! No! Heaven have mercy. Did I not give your worship fair warning? Did I not tell you they were windmills? And that nobody could think them otherwise unless he had also windmills in his head?
Peace, Sancho, peace. The life of knights-errant is subject to 1,000 hazards and misfortunes. But, on the other hand, they may at any moment be transformed into kings and emperors, as experience has demonstrated.
Don Quixote, whom some think did indeed have windmills in his mind, and whom others praise for a wisdom rare in fable or in reality, this Don Quixote has come to represent the power and paradox in our continuous quest for the ideal. He strikes us on one hand as a cracked-brained dreamer whose imagination changed everything he saw into what he desired to see, and himself into what he desired to be. On the other hand, the Don emerges as a visionary spirit with the audacity to challenge, in his own way, a reality that is not wholly satisfying, and, in doing so, In some mysterious way, the imaginary Don becomes for us more real than his creator. In dying, Don Quixote recovers his senses and confesses that it had all been a madness. But by then he had accomplished what he was born to do, to bear witness to the life of the ideal. Moreover, he had planted the seed of his dream in the heart of his squire, Sancho. At that deathbed, Sancho begs Don Quixote to return to his true senses, to a world where marvels await them around every corner, and the faithful squire might find himself governor of an island Utopia at any moment. The exploits of Don Quixote exemplify the power of an ideal to invade life and transform it. That power is incontestably real and beyond computing. It has made possible our forms of human society, our religions, our art, our morality, our philosophy, perhaps our concept of humanity itself. The idealists of the world, the men, women, saints, scientists, artists, and philosophers, who down through the ages have sought for the ball of gold in the sky, are they victims of self-deceit? Or are they civilization's midwives, assisting at the birth of new truths? Those who hold fast to a bright vision, despite the blows that time and life may deal, can lead us to new realms and new realities beyond our imaginings. They are the heart of humanity.
Ride a wild horse with purple wings, striped yellow and black, except his head, which must be red. Ride a wild horse against the sky, hold tight to his wings before you die. Whatever else you leave undone. Once, ride a wild horse into the sun.